Okay, usually when we crack open a source for these deep dives, we're looking for data.
Mhm.
We're looking for, productivity hacks, historical analysis, maybe the latest tech trends.
Yeah.
But
Today.
today,
Today is different.
today we are walking right into the fire.
We really are. The source material we're analyzing describes the topic as, and I quote, sacred and brutal territory.
That phrase really stopped me in my tracks,
Oh.
sacred and brutal. It's not a combination of words you hear often, especially not in psychology.
No.
We are diving into a piece titled Undetected, No Face, No Case Full and Fine by Kendaya Ali. And honestly, calling this a standard psychological breakdown feels like a massive undersell.
It does. Ali isn't just looking at clinical diagnoses here. She's framing the dynamic between the abuser and the abused, almost like, well, like theology or even dark magic.
Right.
She argues that these behaviors, the gaslighting, the shrinking, the exploding, they're ritualistic. These are survival rituals shaped by energy, control, and deep-seated trauma.
That word ritual is so key because a ritual is something you repeat until it has meaning, right? But here, the argument is that these behaviors are repeated daily until they become an unconscious identity.
Exactly. You don't even know you're doing it anymore. You don't do the abuse or the submission. You just are it.
It's the operating system running in the background.
Precisely. And before we go any further, I think we need to flag the mission of this deep dive because the text is very specific about it.
Okay.
The goal here is not to simply demonize one side and sanctify the other. It's not about pointing fingers for the sake of blame.
Which is a real tightrope walk.
Yeah.
Because usually when we talk about abuse, we want a villain and a victim.
Yeah.
We want clear lines. We want to know who to root for.
And we have those lines behaviorally. The harm is absolutely real. But the insight, the deep dive part, is understanding that both roles are actually trying to solve the same problem. Survival.
Okay.
The text says we need to see clearly where healing is possible and identify where, to use the author's rather intense phrasing, spiritual war is still being waged.
Spiritual war. I mean, that sets the stakes pretty high. It implies a battle for the soul, not just a disagreement about who does the dishes.
Exactly.
So let's unpack this. We've got these two archetypes, the abuser and the abused. How do we end up in these roles? Is it just bad luck? DNA? What does the source say about the origin stories here?
Well, the source suggests that these roles are often rooted in life circumstances, specifically in childhood. It's almost like a fork in the road where a trauma happens, and the child's survival strategy dictates which path they take.
Like a casting call that no child signed up for.
A casting call they never knew was happening. The text says that deeming the growth into one or the other is usually the outcome.
Let's look at the abuser first, because I think the common perception is just, this is a bad person. Maybe they're just born arrogant or cruel. But the origin story here is a lot more tragic.
It is a tragedy. The text describes the abuser as, often, a child who was punished for being weak.
Punished for being weak. Let's just sit with that for a second. What does that actually look like for a kid?
Well, imagine a 5-year-old. They cry because they dropped their ice cream or they're scared of the dark. Just normal vulnerability. But instead of comfort, they get ridiculed. They get crushed.
Stop crying. Don't be a baby. Toughen up.
Right. Or maybe they are physically punished for showing fear. The lesson they learn isn't just be brave.
No, the lesson is vulnerability equals pain.
It's worse. It's vulnerability equals danger. Vulnerability equals annihilation. So to survive, that child creates a defense mechanism. They decide, unconsciously, I will never be the weak one again. If I have to be in this room, I will be the one holding the hammer, not the nail.
They become the punisher.
To escape their own powerlessness.
Yeah.
Exactly. They flip the script.
And that must have a huge impact on their development.
It arrests it.
Yeah.
The source notes that they are often stuck at the age they were first wounded. They might be a 40-year-old executive running a company, but emotionally, you are engaging with the terrified 7-year-old who is puffing up their chest because they think they're about to be destroyed.
There's this one line in the text that I highlighted like 3 times. It describes how they protect their ego. It says they protect it like it's a dying god.
It's a powerful, haunting image, isn't it? A dying god.
Yeah.
Think about what that implies.
Desperation.
Total desperation. A dying god is frantic. It demands worship. It implies something fragile that needs constant sacrifice just to stay alive.
And if you stop worshiping, if you see the person behind the curtain,
then you are an existential threat. If you see behind their mask, if you see that weak child underneath, they have to punish you. They perceive it as a life or death situation. They have to reestablish dominance immediately.
Wow. Okay, so that's the abuser. Not a monster born in a lab, but a child in a suit of armor that's way too heavy for them. Now let's look at the flip side, the abused.
Right.
If the abuser was the child punished for being weak, who was the abused?
The abused, according to Ali, is often the child who was punished for existing.
Oof. Punished just for being there, not for doing something wrong.
No. Maybe they were too much, or the environment was just chaotic, narcissistic, filled with addiction, but the message they received was always, your needs are a burden. You are in the way.
So the survival strategy isn't to grab the hammer.
No.
It's to disappear.
Precisely. They equate peace with silence. They equate love with sacrifice. The text even mentions that these individuals are often hyper-empathic or spiritually gifted. They become like sponges.
You know, usually when we hear empath, we think of it as this beautiful spiritual gift. But the way it's framed here, it sounds more like a trauma response.
That is exactly what it is.
Like hypervigilance dressed up as a personality trait.
That's it. If you can feel the mood of the room change before anyone else does, you can stay safe, right? You can dodge the bullet. Is dad angry? Is mom sad? I need to know before they even know.
But the cost of that has to be enormous. You're just constantly scanning.
The cost is staggering. The author writes that they carry entire atmospheres on their back just to keep a peace that was never theirs to hold.
That is heavy. Carrying an atmosphere. It's like they're walking around trying to control the weather for everyone else, just so they don't get rained on.
That is a perfect analogy. And they think that's their job. They think that's what makes them valuable. So you have the dying god and the atmosphere carrier.
And they fit together like a jagged puzzle.
A perfect, terrible fit.
It's tragic because you can see how these two psychologies just lock into place. But let's talk about the engine driving it, the fear. Because on the surface, the abuser looks confident, maybe arrogant, and the abused looks, well, scared. But are they both driven by fear?
Absolutely. But the flavor of the fear is different.
Okay, break it down. What keeps the abuser up at night?
Exposure, losing control, and paradoxically, becoming like the people who hurt them. Remember, they became the punisher to avoid being the victim. Their greatest terror is returning to that state of helplessness.
So when they're lashing out, it's basically a panic response to feeling like they might lose control.
Often, yes. The text says they confuse control with love, because to them, genuine love felt unsafe or manipulative. If they can't control you, they don't feel safe loving you.
It's a trap.
Genuine, open-handed love feels like a trap to them, yes.
And what about the abused? What's their core fear?
Abandonment, conflict, and being seen as dramatic or broken.
Oh, that dramatic label. That's a classic weapon, isn't it? You're just being dramatic.
It is a silencer. And for the abused, who learn to be invisible, being called dramatic is like a spotlight being turned on them when they're trying to hide.
Right.
They fear that if they speak up, if they have needs, they will be left alone. So the survival programming kicks in. Stay small, don't speak, don't want too much.
It's heartbreaking because the abuser uses "you're dramatic" to regain control, and the abused immediately shuts down to avoid abandonment. It's a perfect loop.
That's the cycle described in the text. It's an energetic exchange. And this is where a simple summary usually fails because it's not just about arguments, it's about how they handle pain.
Right. Let's walk through that dynamic. How do they feed off each other in this loop?
Well, think of pain or shame like a hot coal.
Okay, a hot coal.
The abuser cannot hold the coal. Their ego is too fragile. They cannot sit with the feeling of, I made a mistake, or I feel small. So they externalize it. They throw the coal at you.
They make you feel small so they don't have to.
Immediately. They treat it like a grenade. I'm not holding this, you hold it. They project their incompetence or their shame onto you. I didn't lose the keys, you distracted me.
And the abused, they catch the grenade.
They catch it, and they tuck it into their pocket. The abused internalizes pain. They say, okay, I'll hold this, I'll bury this inside me if it means we can have peace. I'll take the blame so things calm down.
They do this to maintain safety.
And, as the text notes, to earn worth.
To earn worth, like, I'm valuable because I can take your abuse.
Exactly. I am lovable because I can endure you. They view their high pain tolerance as a virtue.
Man, that's the trap. But here is where the source makes a really crucial distinction. I want to make sure we get this right.
Yeah.
Because we just said both are acting from trauma. Both are survivors of childhood wounds. It sounds like we're saying everyone is a victim. But the text draws a hard line in the sand here.
It does, and this is vital. The source says both are in trauma, but only one is weaponizing it.
Only one is weaponizing it.
Yes. Being wounded is not a choice. We all get wounded. How you handle that wound is a choice. The abuser uses their trauma as a sword to control others. The abused uses their trauma as a shield to hide behind. Both are tragic, but the impact is fundamentally different.
One is actively causing harm to manage their internal state.
That's the distinction.
There's another metaphor in the text that illustrates this perfectly. It talks about walls and bridges. I feel like this relates so much to modern therapy speak, where everyone talks about boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
The text says, the abuser builds walls and calls them boundaries.
I feel like we see this a lot. What's the difference? Give me an example of a wall masquerading as a boundary.
Okay, so a true boundary protects your well-being while allowing for connection. It's, I can't talk when you yell. A wall cuts off accountability. It's, you aren't allowed to bring up my behavior because that upsets me, and that's my boundary.
Ah, so a wall is designed to keep the truth out.
Exactly. And the abused, the text says, the abused builds bridges and calls them apologies.
Builds bridges and calls them apologies. That hits hard. So they're apologizing just to reconnect, even when they did nothing wrong.
Yes. They are so desperate to bridge the gap, to end the conflict, that they will say, I'm sorry, just to pave the road back to safety. They use their own dignity as the construction material for that bridge.
They lay themselves down so the abuser can walk over them back to peace.
A profound and devastating image. You have one person building walls to keep truth out and another person building bridges to let love back in.
They just collide.
They are. And that's why the section on breaking the pattern is so distinct for each role. You cannot give the same advice to both.
Right. If you tell the abused to be more understanding, you're just feeding their pathology.
Yeah.
And if you tell the abuser to stand their ground, you're handing them a weapon.
Exactly.
So let's look at the prescription. Let's start with the abused. What does the text say they need to do to stop building those bridges out of their own dignity?
First up, reclaim your no as sacred.
Sacred. Not just important, but sacred.
No is a complete sentence. For someone who learned to be invisible, no feels like an act of war. But the text says it is the beginning of selfhood. It's reclaiming the right to exist separately from the other person's needs.
And then there's this one. Separate love from tolerance.
This is a big one. Many people who have been abused believe that loving someone means tolerating their bad behavior. The source is saying you can love someone and still refuse to tolerate their abuse.
You can love them from a distance where you aren't being shot at.
Exactly. You have to untangle those two things.
And stop shrinking to make others feel big. That goes right back to that childhood origin, doesn't it? Being punished for existing.
It does. It's a direct countercommand to that childhood programming. But the deepest point for the abused, I think, is this. Heal not just the wounds, but the story of why you deserved them.
Oh, that's the kicker. Because you can heal the bruise, you can leave the relationship, but if you still believe deep down, I deserve that because I'm flawed, you'll just find another abuser.
Correct. You have to rewrite the narrative that says your suffering is a reflection of your worth. You have to believe you are worthy of safety without earning it through pain.
Okay, now let's pivot to the abuser. The text includes a caveat here. If they're willing.
A very necessary caveat, because often the defense mechanisms are so thick they can't even hear the call to change. But if they are willing, the path is steep.
It starts with, stop hiding behind blame and fear. No more externalizing.
No more, I did this because you made me mad, taking ownership of that grenade.
And then, do the grief work.
This is fascinating because we don't usually associate abusers with grief. We associate them with anger. But the text says they need to mourn who you were before you became your wound.
That goes back to that child who was punished for being weak. They have to grieve that child. They have to admit they were hurt.
And that is terrifying for them. Because to grieve is to be vulnerable. And remember, their whole identity is built on not being vulnerable. It requires the death of that dying God we talked about.
There's also a point about apologies here for the abuser. Apologize without needing forgiveness.
This is crucial. Often, an abuser will apologize, but it's transactional. I said, I'm sorry, so now you have to stop being mad. That's just another form of control.
Right.
A true apology acknowledges the harm done, regardless of whether the other person forgives them. It's about accountability, not absolution.
Finally, learn to feel without harming others. Which sounds simple, but if you've spent a lifetime weaponizing your feelings, that's like learning a new language.
It's rewiring the entire nervous system. It's learning that you can feel anger, shame, or fear, and you don't have to destroy the room or the person next to you to manage it.
You have to learn to hold the hot coal yourself until it cools down.
That's the work.
This brings us to the conclusion of the source.
Yeah.
And it distinguishes between reversal and rebirth.
Yes. The author states, healing doesn't happen through reversal. It happens through rebirth.
What does that mean to you?
I think it means you can't just undo the damage. You can't just go back to who you were before. You have to become someone entirely new. The patterns are so deep, so ritualistic, as we said at the start, that you have to fundamentally change your relationship with yourself and the world.
You have to be born again in a psychological and spiritual sense.
Yes.
And for the listener who might be seeing themselves in the abused category,
Right.
or maybe realizing they have tendencies of the abuser, the text leaves us with some reflection prompts.
Yeah,
And I think these are worth really sitting with.
they are. I'd ask you, the listener, to consider this one. What silent habits or inner dialogues have I internalized from living in a space of control, shame, or fear?
Yeah. And another one that hits home. How do I respond when I feel like a nuisance? Do I shrink, over-explain, or self-edit? That over-explaining thing, I think a lot of people do that without realizing it's a trauma response.
Absolutely. You're trying to talk your way out of a punishment that hasn't even happened yet. You're preemptively defending yourself.
And conversely, if you find yourself on the other side of this, ask yourself, if I have acted in controlling or dismissive ways, what hidden fear might be beneath that behavior?
Yeah.
It forces you to look behind your own mask.
The source also asks, where in my life do I repress my emotions? Joy, sadness, anger, to keep the peace, and what does it cost me?
The cost is usually your own vitality, your own life force. You become a shell.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of heavy stuff, walls, dying gods, atmospheres of pain. But the source ends on this really powerful, hopeful image. It's a challenge to the reader.
It is, and it's my favorite part of the entire analysis. It acknowledges that you may not be able to change the abuser. You can't force someone else to do the grief work. You can't save them.
Right, but you can save something else.
You can save your future. The text says, you can become the first in your lineage to live without fear as your alarm clock.
Live without fear as your alarm clock.
Yes.
Stop me cold. Just imagine that. Most people, especially those in these dynamics, wake up and the first thing they feel is anxiety. It's the jolt, the rush. What mood are they in? What did I forget? How do I survive today?
It's defense mechanisms booting up before your eyes are even open. It's a cortisol spike instead of a sunrise. The text is asking us to imagine a life where you wake up and your first thought isn't, how do I avoid pain today? But simply being, presence, safety.
That's the rebirth. That's the goal, not just better conflict resolution skills,
Yeah.
but freedom.
Real freedom. It requires walking through that sacred and brutal territory we talked about. It requires dismantling the rituals. But the other side isn't just survival. It's a life that actually belongs to you.
So as you go about your day, or maybe as you wake up tomorrow morning, pay attention to that alarm clock. Not the one on your phone,
Yeah.
the one in your chest. Is it ringing with fear?
And if it is, what wall do you need to tear down, or what bridge do you need to stop building to turn that alarm off?
That's the work. Thanks for diving deep with us today. This one was intense, but I think it was necessary.
Essential.
Take care of yourselves out there. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.